I've got good news and I've got bad news. Let me tick off a couple of the items of good news first. We're in historic times, by any account. Nelson Mandela said, historic times are the convergence of crisis and leadership. Do we have crisis? And do we have leadership? Second good news, Governor O'Malley, taking a huge stand for the environment. President Obama, come out with a strong set of principles. We've got his administration yet to prove itself, but President Obama, huge bit of good news for the environment. Green is in. You can't pick up a newspaper, listen to a television news broadcast. Green is in. From everything from energy efficiency to living more lightly on the land, green is in. Having been duly chastised, I won't say we have perfect science, but we have good science. We really have some of the best science in the world right here on Chesapeake Bay. We've got the technology. We're starting to see slight improvements in oysters. The tolerance for disease seems to be improving. The MSX and the dermo are not seen to have the same impact they've had in the past. Crabs doing a little better thanks to some strong measures by Governor O'Malley and Governor Kane. Starting to see 3 or 4 years now of underwater grasses getting a little bit better. And the scientists have even been telling us that maybe the dead zones aren't coming at us as quickly as they were in the past. Maybe they're even starting to retreat a little bit. The amount of rain this summer could put a damper on it this year, but the last few years, the dead zones haven't been as bad as they were thought to be. We've got the executive order from President Obama. Huge opportunity. We've got the administrator, Lisa Jackson. And I've saved the best for last. We've got the czar of the Chesapeake Bay at EPA and Chuck Fox sitting right over there. Chuck Fox, who has stood side by side with us for 30 years, from the days he was an organizer going door to door at the EPA as a direct advisor to Administrator Lisa Jackson. Did I say I had some bad news? No. It's all good. It's all teed up. Everything's ready to go. We can declare victory and go home, right? No. Not on your life. Not on your life. If we want to have any chance, and I underscore the word chance, of saving the Chesapeake Bay, we've all got to commit ourselves to the biggest fight for clean water this nation has ever seen, and keep fighting for it until we start to see real results, and then keep fighting for it until those results are sustained. Here's the bad news. The bay and its rivers and its streams are still terribly polluted by any measurement. Even out in western Maryland, one of our staff, Tom Pelton, some of you may have known him when he wrote for the Baltimore Sun, was out camping with his family last weekend. Savage River Reservoir, beautiful, pristine, filled with life. He came back, he Googled Savage River Reservoir, found out it was on EPA's impaired waters list for mercury contamination. People are getting bacterial infections. Not every time you swim, but there are enough that are happening to give you real cause for concern, especially after a heavy rain, especially up the rivers. Fish. Some fish, more than others, have levels of contaminants that are cause for concern. Some cause for great concern. And all this in the nation's estuary. The national treasure that we've known that President Obama has declared. The fact that a national treasure is as polluted as it is a national shame that all Americans ought to be sorry for, ashamed for, and willing to fight to change. Science tells us the bay is a single ecological system. It spans 64,000 square miles, 6 states. The only jurisdiction of government that can truly do what science says and manage it as a single system is the federal government. Like it or not, they are the only jurisdiction by law that can manage the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed as a single system. As much as Governor O'Malley, Governor Kane, Governor Rendell in Pennsylvania have been working to do good things, their jurisdiction stops at the state line. Here's what the Clean Water Act says in law, passed back in the early 70s. The undergirding of clean water laws in the country, the Clean Water Act. If you have an impaired water body, you cannot legally be permitted to add more pollution to that water body until the impairment is reversed. It's absolutely fundamental. It makes intuitive sense, and it's the law. If the water body is impaired, a legal term under the Clean Water Act, you may not be allowed. Government may not permit you to add more pollution until that impairment is reversed. And yet, with 85% of the bay and tributary rivers impaired, more pollution is being permitted every day, and government is allowing this to happen. As much as we have good government in many respects, the fundamental law of the land is not being enforced. I can give you some examples. Steel mill. Merck, giant pharmaceutical, out on the Shenandoah River. Building permits every day, adding pollution legally to impaired waters. If the bay is going to be saved, the federal government has got to draw a line in the sand and be willing, as Dr. Boesch said, to make it mandatory that pollution is not allowed. Secretary John Griffin, many of us have known him and worked with him for, I hate to say again, 30 years, said it as much in a congressional hearing before Senator Cardin last week. He said the federal government has got to put real consequences on the states if we fail to enforce the law. That's what we need. To think of that as a state secretary of natural resources saying the federal government's got to force us to do this. The same thing happened when Preston Bryant, the secretary in Virginia, said EPA, scare us. That's what we need to go to our legislators. We need you to scare us so we can go to them and tell them they have to give us the laws and the support we need. And now to really burst your bubble. EPA, for all that it's doing well, is still an entrenched bureaucracy. We and our partners, one of whom is Bernie Fowler, the Watermen's Association of Maryland and Virginia, former mayor of D.C., Tony Williams, have sued EPA to enforce the Clean Water Act. We were in negotiating a settlement because they say they want to settle just last week. The top folks at EPA. Let me tell you what happened. We heard a lot more, no, we can't do that, than yes, we can, and we're going to try to do that. A lot of the lawyers, a lot of the bureaucracy is saying, we just can't do that. We can't stop pollution. The good news is that Bob Sussman, the administrator's highest-ranking advisor on clean water, a light went off in his eyes, and he started to say things like, is that really true? And he turned to his people, and they'd go, he said, you mean we're allowing that to, and then he'd catch himself because he didn't want to undercut his own staff. But you could see him understanding things about what's happening here on the Chesapeake Bay that he didn't know. And my hope is he's taken that to Lisa Jackson. We offered him a modest proposal. We said, look, if you can't do everything right away, and we understand that, why don't you pick one permit in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, draw the line and say, we're going to deny it. And at the same time, tell the states, by date certain, we're going to do that for all the permits until we start to reverse the impairments. It'll be out in the future, but we're going to do it. Sussman looked like he was going to say, that's a pretty good idea, when he caught himself, and the others in the room said, we can't do that. We just can't do that. We've got so many, such big problems. How can we just deal with 3 permits? You got to start somewhere. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I've been tough on EPA, and the reason I'm tough on EPA is because Chuck Fox needs all the help he can get. He needs us out there pushing him because whether he's actually able to say it all in public, he believes everything we do and probably a heck of a lot more. There are a lot of forces lined up against what we're calling for, against what I imagine most of us in this room want. If we're going to overcome those forces, we have to be louder, we have to be more persistent, we have to be more attuned to the good science and to know the law. If we do that, I would submit to you, we can save this Chesapeake Bay in our lifetime. If we don't, I am absolutely certain we won't. Thank you very much.